Okay, so here is the deal today. Are you with me? Okay, we're good. We're focused. So I have class very soon. I don't want to rush this video at all. I get very stressed when I have to film and like on a time limit. So what I'm thinking is probably likely going to end up being the case is that I'm going to film like half of this video right now and then get out of my pajama pants and then run out the door, go to school, come back, and then you'll see me in like a split second, but I'll be like back from class, probably looking very exhausted. But that's the situation we're working with. So welcome to my November wrap up. I read so much this month because there were so many heavy school readings. I had 2 essays due, I had a number of tests, and so I'm not gonna go through everything I read for uni because that's impossible, but like the major stuff I can show you is here. But as well, the fact that I had to write 2 essays meant I had to read so many secondary source essays, anthologies, just like random articles and books, and that was so much. So I'm actually very happy that I got through the amount of like hobby reading and book club reading that I did this month. So let's get started. I'm so happy you're here. Are you cozy? Are you okay? How you feeling? Let's just talk about books. All right, so first things first, I think we're going to start with a couple of spooky picks that slid over into November from October that I didn't get to finish in October. And the first one is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. So I believe this is the 4th book in the Poirot series going in order, and that's what I've been trying to do is read the series in order. However, with this one, I'm not going to say too much because I also filmed a whole entire video trying to solve this Murder of Roger Ackroyd book, story, detective novel, wherein a man named Roger Ackroyd is stabbed and Hercule Poirot has to try and solve what happened to him. There's also some blackmail in this one, but I will leave the video up above where I try to solve it. It was so much fun, and this video is getting really good response from you guys. Thank you so much. It's getting so much support, and it's kind of like, I think it's like kind of blowing up right now because every time I check on it, so many more thousands of people have watched it. So thank you so much. I will definitely be making more because I've gotten so many requests. So yeah, overall, I gave this book 3 stars, because maybe 3.5. I think 3.5 because I love Agatha Christie books. However, I was a bit jaded, and if you watch this video, you will know why. But I still really did enjoy it, don't get me wrong, and I loved it. And I'm so glad I got to read another one in the series. So there may or may not be another one, maybe with some Christmas vibes coming your way very soon in the Agatha Christie world, in the Agatha versus Emma universe. So yeah, that was that one. And then the only other one I have here from spooky season is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I've been wanting to read this book for forever. I believe I found this copy thrifted, and I thought finally for Halloween 2021 I would start it. I started this like a couple of days before Halloween. It is a very short little book, and I had previously started the TV show, which is nothing like this book really. It takes some vague inspiration, but in the book proper, we are following this man, Dr. Montague, and what he wants to do is research real, supernatural phenomenon and prove that it exists or just see kind of what's out there. And so he locates Hill House, which is supposed to be this very notorious, spooky, haunted house, and he decides to take on with him 3 other people as his assistants. 2 of them are women who have experienced somewhat questionable, vaguely supernatural experiences or phenomena in their past, and the other one is a man named Luke, who is kind of the ancestor of this house. It belongs to his family. This book, wow, this is a very slow burn haunted house, spooky setting where you're not really sure what is going on. Like, you just don't know what's happening. I had no idea where this book was going. I never really heard of the story before. It was such a delight to read. One of my favorite things about this book, I gave it 4 stars, was the writing. Shirley Jackson's like figuring of the haunted house and architecture. That's like one of my favorite things, and I got to like take a class on this kind of in uni that focused a lot on like space and time and specific architecture of buildings and what that does to your mind and how it can affect you and how spaces, like what meaning like certain spaces have essentially. And Hill House is just so incredibly complicated, such a cool structure to examine because it's made of like all these wrong angles that don't line up, and so while you're there it like messes with your sense of balance, and what you think is like straight, what you think is upright essentially, are actually things that are slightly skewed. And it just really resonated with me personally, I think, because I spent so much time with my world like literally skewed from a concussion, and so it was just horrifying for me doubly, I think, on that front. But the writing was just beautiful. Even like the first sentence, no live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. The writing was gorgeous. It was just so cool. I thought it was just so cool the way that this house was built. Like, who would do that? Every angle is slightly wrong. Angles which you assume are the right angles you are accustomed to and have every right to expect are true are actually a fraction of a degree off in one direction or another. Of course, the result of all these tiny aberrations of measurement adds up to a fairly large distortion in the house as a whole. And so like when you leave Hill House, all of a sudden your world like changes again because you got used to Hill House. But essentially we're following Eleanor principally, who is probably the most troubled young woman in this house. She had a very abusive relationship with her family and she definitely brings that into the house. And essentially what this book asks of you as the reader is to kind of determine, is this house haunted or is this house being haunted? Are houses haunted or do you haunt the houses, essentially? I don't think I'm going to say any more than this, but I thought this was so well done. The ending was just wow. I wouldn't recommend this if you are not a fan of kind of ambiguous endings or like ambiguous questions like that, but I thought this was brilliant and I really, really love this. I did enjoy We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson more than this actually, because I gave that one 5 stars, but this was still amazing and I'm so glad I read this for Halloween. I loved it. Then I read a very popular romance, and that is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. First of all, I just want to say thank you to this book and thank you to Talia Hibbert, because this gave me so much that I knew I needed, but I didn't know where to get it from. This follows Chloe, who's in, I think she's in her 20s, late 20s or so, but she's never moved out of her house. She doesn't really think she's done much with her life. And one day when she almost gets hit by a truck or a car, she decides enough is enough and that she's going to make a life that she would like be proud of, life that she thinks is interesting, unique, and full of adventure. And so she drafts up a list of things she's going to do to help her get a life. One of these things is moving out, and so she moves into an apartment building and she meets the superintendent of her building, who is this man named Redford Morgan. Red. And so you follow their relationship. Chloe also has fibromyalgia, chronic pain, all of that. This book, like I cried at this book. I cried so much. It gave me so much. It really spoke to me, and just everything that Chloe, it was just done so beautifully. Just like the affirmation that, yeah, you can be sick, you can be in pain, but that doesn't mean you're unhappy. That doesn't mean you don't have a full life. That doesn't mean you can't do things or appreciate things or fall in love or blah, blah, blah. It's just a part of your life, and that is who you are. And this book just like prompted me to like not necessarily make a list of my own, but like just confront like sickness and trauma and stuff like that, and like go a little further on that journey and not be so afraid of it, because Chloe is just like, she's so cool, and just I really, really appreciated her as a character. In terms of the romance, I really loved it. I really loved the romance. I thought it was so great. I was not expecting this like cutesy cover to be so full of steamy sections, but there's definitely a lot of steam. We were steaming a lot of broccoli. Steam was everywhere. I loved it so much. I loved Red. Red is also a painter, or he wants to be a painter. He's an aspiring artist, and he's also going through a lot in his life. That was really nice to see as well. I just thought this was beautifully written, so realistically done. The only reason why I really didn't give this 5 stars, because I was considering it, which is very rare, was the ending. I always detest the like 3rd act of romances, because I hate that structure that there has to be, you know, some falling out, some fight, some difficulty, some miscommunication, and then, you know, they have to get over that final hurdle, essentially. It's overdone. I think it's stupid. It doesn't need to be there, especially when Red and Chloe had already like faced so much in their relationship and getting to know each other and being friends. I just really, really detest the 3rd act fallout in romances. And it makes me almost like hate the whole thing, honestly. So that was the reason I had to bump it down a star, but I would highly recommend, like, I really, 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 really love this. And I definitely think it is worth all the hype that it has gotten. So that is the romance that I read this month. So happy about this. I will definitely be continuing on with this series for sure. All right, then, okay, let me talk about this book, because I'm gonna try not to go on a rant right now, but I am so angry. I finished this book about like half an hour before sitting down to film this, and that is Resurrection by Leo Tolstoy. I hated this. I hated this. It feels so good to say that though. Oh my gosh. It's been so long since I've so passionately hated a classic. And this is gonna be such a fun live show. Like, I can feel it right now. Carol and I will have our live show for Resurrection by Leo Tolstoy for the Dickens versus Tolstoy book club on Carolyn's channel. We'll probably have a date announced below in the description box, so definitely tune in for that because I'm getting my boxing gloves out. Like I said, I detested this. One thing I will say is that it feels really good to have read all of Tolstoy's major novels now, and if you're a part of the book club as well, we have done that. We've done that this year, 2021, we read all of Tolstoy's major novels: Childhood, Boyhood, Youth, Anna Karenina, War and Peace, and Resurrection, and it feels really good to have them ticked all off. As you can imagine, this was my least favorite. So this is Tolstoy's final novel, and to me, it just felt like the desperate attempt of a man who knows he's not going to be on the planet much longer, trying to make one final plea for humanity to get their stuff together, because this book is a big examination, a big condemnation of the justice system and the legal system in Russia at the time, and how they basically just imprison everyone and anyone, ship them off to Siberia to do hard labor or just to be convicts and exiles over there. Essentially how the trials are super unjust, the conditions are literally created so that people just go to jail and can't get out of jail, when in reality a lot of these people are innocent, a lot of them are there for no reason, and a lot of them just shouldn't be there based on the crimes they've committed, if they've even committed them. And so in this one we follow a young man named Nekhlyadov, and when he was younger he seduced he seduced another young woman who was staying at his aunt's house named Maslova, and basically kind of ruined her whole life. And from there, we know that Maslova slid into prostitution. Her life became extremely difficult. And one day when Nekhlyadov gets called to be a juryman, he's just come back from working in the military. He is sitting as a juryman, and the prisoner who comes up for trial is none other than Maslova herself, who has been accused of committing a crime that she basically had nothing to do with. However, because the legal system is so corrupt, she is sent off to do hard labor in Siberia. Nekhlyadov at this point realizes that his whole life has been a big bad thing. He's just been doing awful things that he should not be doing, and he essentially awakens and has this moment of resurrection, coming back from just the absolute debauchery and crime and nonsense realm he thinks he has been living his life in. And so he goes on this journey to redeem Maslova by marrying her, even though she wants nothing to do with him, basically. And he is determined to basically follow her around, follow her all the way to Siberia in order to make her life better. This book, I'm not going to say too much here because I'm saving all of my punches for the live show, but I absolutely detested this. Number one, this was so boring. So boring. Very boring. One of the driest books I've ever read. For me, this was kind of like a middleman between War and Peace and Anna Karenina, like bridging that gap between fiction and kind of like this nonfiction research examination book that War and Peace is, because War and Peace isn't technically a novel. But this was just so dry. You just follow Nekhlyadov going around essentially hearing everyone's stories, people who are in prison, like what they've done, and then he goes to, law officials, policemen, clerks, or whatever, and he gets their stories of every bad thing they're doing and how they really shouldn't be in their position of power. But this was just a relentless, driving, repetitive concept throughout the whole book, was just Nekhlyadov talking to people who were either in poor positions when they should not be, or in high positions of power when they also should not be. For me, this book didn't do anything. It didn't make me feel anything. Do I agree with everything that was like speculated? Do I agree with pretty much everything that Tolstoy, is like saying this is wrong? Yeah, of course. Do I think this book did it well or presented it in a way that was engaging, made me want to read, compelled me at all, made me feel anything? No. I wanted to throw this book out the window. This book was an absolute chore to read. There was no nice writing for me in here. The whole thing was just so cut and dry, and the ending. So throughout the whole book, when I got to the ending, I was like, I am so done. I'm ready to throw this book out into the snow and leave it there. Let it sink into the frozen icy wastes. It made me so angry by the time I got to it, because throughout the whole thing, the last like 100 pages, finally you go to Siberia, because up until then it's just Nekhlyadov like trying to get Maslova's case re-examined and give her like a lighter sentence or get her out of it. But then they finally go to Siberia, and then by the end of it, I'm not gonna spoil it, but Nekhlyadov's like whole journey is suddenly reversed, and he starts off on like this new journey on the very last page. And it is just so silly to me. To me, this book did not accomplish anything other than, you know, showing you the real life conditions. I will say that. It is a very good look at like the actual injustice system, that's what I mean, of Russia in this time period. It was published in 1899. But wow, the whole last few pages of this book, where it just made me, I'm just like, you've just made the whole thing so pointless. And like, I thought we were gearing up towards at least a plausible solution, or at least a discussion of a solution or something, you know, because Nekhludoff's been spinning this idea of how do we fix things? How do we fix this horrible mess we've created? It demands the question, like, how can people punish other people when they themselves are not free of, you know, bias and crime and violence and all of that stuff? How can we condemn our fellow people to these lives or to these punishments ourselves when we don't have that power? And I was like, okay, cool, let's see it. Let's see some reform. Let's see some solutions. But the ending of this book and what he clings to as like the solution and the answer is just so, it's just so silly. And for me, it just made the book seem so pointless. So anyway, 2 stars. I think a generous, maybe not a generous 2 stars, but a jaded 2 stars for sure. So anyway, that is Resurrection. Anyway, tune in for the live show for sure, because I'm sure that will be fun. But I'm so happy to be done this book. And if you're wondering, for December, we will be reading A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. So something extremely different. But yep, that is that. That is that. Goodbye. All right, let's discuss something light, something that's just like fun, light, silly, just a good companion. I saw this book on Libby, on my audiobook app, my local library app, and I picked it up. It's a fairly older young adult. I think it's a very, very young adult, and that is Princess Academy. Who is this by? Shannon? Is your name Shannon? Shannon LaHale, Shannon Sherry, Shannon, it's probably not even Shannon. Anyway, so this book just ended up being really, really fun, if not a bit young. One thing I will say is that it was just a little bit too young for me, and a little bit too annoying at times. When I would have loved this book if I was like probably 10 or 12 even. This is a fantasy, and we're following this young girl named Miri, and we were set up on a mountain. This was so nice because I had no idea that this book was going to be so full of winter and snow, and all of that imagery that I was just like so craving at the time. But it was, this whole book pretty much celebrated the snow and the winter, and the lives of these people who live up on this mountain. And essentially what they do up here is they work in the quarry, they cut stone, they get stone. It's like this very special stone, and they also have their whole language actually that they speak like in the quarry. It's called quarry speech, and only people who are born here can do it. You know, you have to learn to do it. It's essentially like they can communicate without words. A lot of it has to do with song, a lot of it has to do with community. It was just like a really cool thing in this young adult book that I was not expecting to see, was like this whole discussion of language. Super cool. Like I said, we follow Miri, who has never been allowed to work in the quarry. She's the only girl in this village who has not been allowed to work there for some reason. She doesn't know why. All she knows is that she is forbidden from stepping foot into the quarry, and she's not allowed to speak quarry speech either. Things change when one day delegates from the prince and the king of this kingdom come up the mountain, and they're like, yo, this year our priests have selected your village for the Princess Academy. And the Princess Academy is essentially a school that is built in one town or city or village of this kingdom, where every single girl from the ages of like 12 to 17 or something are taken and taught how to be princesses. And at the end of the year, once they've kind of got their education in, you know, lady-like things, but also politics, conversation, poise, kingdom-y stuff, the prince will come up and choose one of the girls studying at this Princess Academy to be his bride, to be his princess. And so Miri, along with every other girl in her village, gets taken to this Princess Academy that is built on their mountain, and there they train in everything to make them a princess. It was fabulous. It was great. I really liked this. I gave it 3 stars just because it was like midway enjoyable. Do you know what I mean? I probably will never read this again. I don't think I'll continue on with the series, but just at the time for what it was a really nice companion. It was very cozy because we do follow them just like in their day-to-day things like going to lessons, learning how to read because none of them know how to read, singing and making food and learning the politics and the trade and the economy of the kingdom. And it was just like really sweet, honestly. As well, you get to follow and know pretty much all of them. I would recommend if you just want something super light, super fluffy, with some cool fantasy elements and some cozy princess vibes. I would give this cup of coffee to go to a Princess Academy. All right, then I read this guy. Doesn't this look fascinating? This is one of like the actual books that I can show you that I read for uni for one of my essays. This wasn't on our course syllabus, but I had to do a lot of reading for the essays I was writing, and it did pay off because I did do well on them. And if, oh no, that video is not gonna be up yet. I do have a whole video coming about the essay that I was writing, and this is one of the ones I read in that video. So this is called Virgin Mother, Maiden Queen. This is by Helen Hackett. And as you can imagine, this is all about Queen Elizabeth I, which is what my essay was on, specifically like in relation to the representation of mothers in book 1 of The Fairy Queen and how they either comment, relate, or just create discourse around the titles that Queen Elizabeth basically employed for herself, being both the Virgin Queen and the Mother of England, like how she can simultaneously be these two things that should realistically cancel each other out. This was interesting. It was just a great piece of information. It goes over like her coronation, the imagery, the symbols that she basically took on and molded into herself, her court, her marriages, the marriages that didn't work out, possible marriages that would have occurred. It just discusses like basically everything to do with Queen Elizabeth I. So this was a great resource, but yeah. All right, and then I read a book that I just absolutely loved. I picked up Snow and Rose by Emily Winfield Martin. This was a gift from a subscriber, so thank you so much. This is from Jordan. I love this. This is also a beautifully illustrated retelling of the fairy tale Snow White and Rose Red. And so essentially we follow the two little girls. I think what I might do is actually like take an X-Acto knife and frame some of these. I'm not above that. So we follow two sisters, Snow and Rose, and their mother and father, and before this book begins, they had been living in like a very beautiful, luxurious, basically mansion. And they were very well off. They had a really, really good life, but then one day their father goes into the woods that are near where they live, and he never returns. And so all of a sudden, basically everything is taken away from them. They have to move into this tiny little cottage right on the border of the woods, and Snow and Rose eventually start to wander into the woods. And each day they go further and further, both trying to just see what's out there for themselves, but deep in their hearts trying to find their father. They encounter so many new friends and like foes, and it was just so sweet. I loved it. It gave me that like cozy, woodsy, oaky afterbirth that I wanted. It was a little dark, it was a little spooky, you had those fairy tale elements in there, and it was just really, really sweet. As well, there's so much about winter. You do have Christmas in here as well, so if you're looking for a wintry book perhaps, or just a book to keep you warm, this one will definitely do it. One thing I will say I wish for this book was that the writing was a bit more lyrical and more fitted to the story, because at times it just felt a little bit awkward, a little bit stilted. I don't know if this is her first book. This is definitely a middle grade. That's truly one of my only critiques, is that I just wish the writing was a little bit more magical itself, but I really loved all the little nooks and crannies of this book, and I would highly recommend. I gave it 4 stars. So that is Snow and Rose. Also for class, I read Astrophil and Stella by Philip Sidney. This is a sonnet sequence by Philip Sidney, who is basically like not necessarily the founder or the father of English sonnet writing, but pretty much. I had never heard of this work until I saw it on my Renaissance Lit class syllabus. And wow, this was actually so good. The writing in here was just gorgeous. Philip Sidney like went off. Let me just tell you a little bit about this, because I truly think that anyone could enjoy this, especially if you wanted to like dip your toes into Renaissance poetry or sonnet sequences, sonnets in general. So essentially Astrophil and Stella, we have Astrophil, who is this dude who's kind of maybe a representation of Philip Sidney to some degree, and as well we have Stella, who is also a representation of this real woman named Penelope. Now, Philip Sidney was in love with Penelope, however, they both married different people. And so these sonnets are sonnets of frustration, of fruitless love, love that will never come to be because they're both married, they're never gonna get together, but Philip Sidney is still very much in love with Penelope. This sonnet sequence is composed of 108 poems or 108 sonnets, and what's really cool is that these 108 poems mimic the 108 suitors from the Odyssey. And if you've read the Odyssey, you know that Penelope is the wife of Odysseus, and she is like that very faithful wife stereotype who waits and waits and waits like 20 years for her husband to come back from the war, and she never gives in or marries one of these 108 suitors that are really just harassing her for marriage. And so like he knows that his 108 sonnets of love, of like pining, of suffering, are going to be as those 108 suitors in the Odyssey, who eventually all get killed pretty much by Odysseus. So that was a cool tidbit, a little bit extra, but that's okay. These were just so gorgeous. Maybe I'll put some like quotes on right now from a few of my favorites because they were actually so beautiful, but they're a little bit whiny at times, but that does come with the genre and the time period because a lot of this is still very much in the Petrarchan tradition, Petrarchan convention, and a little side note on that, Petrarch was an Italian poet, very famous, and he essentially was the first to come up with all these metaphors, all these images, and essentially this figure known as the Petrarchan lover, who is always usually a man who is suffering in love and doesn't ever get his wishes. Women are so disdainful of him and he will never find their love. I want to say, no, should I say this? It kind of gives me original, like the original incel vibes. Is that a completely fair comparison? I don't think so. But you kind of see the resemblance. Anyway, I really loved Astrophil and Stella. I thought it was beautiful. Just the writing is really what I loved. And like so many of these lines were just gorgeous. So I gave this 4 stars, very surprised. And I would definitely love to check out more of Philip Sidney's poetry on my hobby time. So yeah, I actually need to run to class now, but I do have about 4 more works to get through. So I'm gonna go to class and then I'm gonna come back and you will see me in like 5 seconds. So see you very soon. I am back from class. Oh my gosh. I am exhausted, but let us finish up talking about the last few books that I read. So I don't know where we were. Let's start with something nice and easy. I decided just to pick up on a whim one of the last manga that I had on my shelf that I had not yet read through, and that was Happy Marriage Volume 1 by Maki and Joji. I actually heard about this one because it was like advertised for in the back of one of the mangas that I was previously reading, so the advertisement worked. I bought it. This is about a woman whose father is in extreme debt, like her family is in extreme debt. And to help her father and her father's business, she agrees to marry the son of the businessman that she is working for. Like she works at their company, and the CEO, who is this guy's, I think, grandfather actually, is like, oh my gosh, like I know your mother, we were really good friends, or your grandmother. It's a bit fuzzy, honestly, the reasoning why. But anyway, they get married, and she does not take this marriage very seriously. Like she doesn't think too much of it. He, on the other hand, is like extremely committed, thinks it is super legit, and is going to act as such. I think I would definitely continue on with this one just because it's so fun and ridiculous and silly. They're just so good to sink into when like everything gets a bit overwhelming. I don't know, it was fun. I enjoyed it, so I think I give this like 3 stars-ish. Then I read The Marriage of Heaven and Hell by William Blake. This was a reread for me. This is an assortment of strange words and sentences, basically talking about how we need to break down the binaries that we've created. And before Derrida, the theorist and the critic, who talks about deconstruction, which is the work of breaking down binaries, because he says in every binary, one side is always demonized, and you know, good and evil, man and woman, light and dark, everything you think of can be thought in binaries. It's one of the ways that humans, you know, think. But William Blake, in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, is arguing for more of a harmony between these things. We need to be balanced with both, instead of just splitting 2 sides of things apart, in this case, heaven and hell and what they embody. He takes on the role of kind of the prophet, the voice of God in here, and he is very angry at the church for demonizing the body, demonizing energy, and it is just a huge critique of everything that has basically come out of society and religion and stuff like that, and I really liked it. I really liked it. Definitely not my favorite thing I've studied at uni, but I did enjoy it, and I did just have to write a test on one of the lines in here, just one of the lines, which was just one thought fills immensity. What mean? The last physical book I have to talk to you about here is Thus Were Their Faces by Silvina Ocampo. This was the Dark Academics book pick for October and November. It was my turn to pick, so I chose this one because someone actually left this as a recommendation for me when I asked for recommendations for countries around the world, and so they left this for Argentina. If I can find out who it was, thank you. I'll put you right here, but if I can't, thank you anyway. So this is a collection of short stories, and I'm so sad to say I didn't love this as much as I wanted to. I gave this 3 stars. I really thought having a collection full of dark, spooky, fantastic, strange occurrences would kind of redeem the short story-ness of it, because I'm not a fan of short stories. I really do not like short stories for one reason or the other, but this didn't. But I will say, if you are a fan of the grotesque, there's a lot of gothic stories in here which just got weird things going on, and a lot of these stories have like one big twist at the end, which I really enjoyed, because when you go back and then read the story, you can kind of see maybe some clues that would have alerted you to the twist. On the whole, I thought these were really unique and interesting stories. They just weren't fully I just didn't fully appreciate them, didn't fully connect to them, and I think it's because of the nature of the short story, and I ultimately, I just don't like short stories. But yes, the live show for this is going to be postponed. It will be on my channel, but we are all so busy at the moment, especially with December coming up, so we will let you know when that will be, but probably towards the end of December or even the beginning of January, it's looking like. But yeah, if you did read this, or if you have read this, please let me know your thoughts, because I'm really actually interested to see what people make of a lot of these short stories. One of my favorite things has to be the running theme of dolls and women and aging and growing up in this collection. That was just so creepy and haunting. So yeah, I think this was actually the last book I read in the month as well, aside from all the other university things. So there you go. Yes, I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, let us know what you read or what your favorite book was. I will have my December TBR video up on Friday, which is literally in a couple of days, right? So yeah, a couple of you guys said that you missed that from last month, and I was like, I missed it too. I was just really busy. So December's will definitely be up, because I am most excited for December's reading. So I am gonna go have some food. I might even take a nap. It's gonna be a wild night. It's a very gloomy evening, so yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here for the second last wrap up of 2021. In the description, you will find links to all of the books mentioned in this video, along with links to other things, I believe, some social media and book club stuff potentially, and maybe, I don't know who else. There's other things down there, isn't there? Anyway, I hope you have a really great day or night or evening, and I hope you give yourself a big hug from me, and I will see you very soon. So